What? You thought just because I had a smart sounding video title for once that I was gonna take any of this seriously? Oh, look at big old YouTube essayist over here talking about anime. Like, what? Margaret, they're on to me! Look, it would be incredibly stupid for me to take a show like VTuber Legends so seriously when I'm messing around the rest of the time. I mean, to really dig in and analyze a show that's meant to be dumb like this one is just ridiculous. And if you think that, I have bad news for you. Because hello, and also welcome back to Binging Last Season, where this week I am going to wax poetic for 10 minutes about Hololive the anime, and you can't stop me. VTuber Legend is not the best anime that I've ever seen. It's not the most profound thing that came out in the summer, but it is really interesting, and there are a lot of specific details that I want to go over. So minimal spoilers, and let's get into it. But first, we've got a message from today's sponsor, that guy who still hates VTubers in 2024. Yeah, I didn't really anticipate this, but it seems like there is a certain barrier of entry. I just kind of assumed a while back that people had just accepted VTubers across the board. At one point, I started watching compilations on YouTube of their funniest moments, and I sort of understood the gimmick. I didn't really get it at first, but I came to understand that they were just normal people, a little bit more raunchy, a little bit more sexual, a little bit more strange, and not showing their faces using this little model. And I was like, okay, sure, I get it. But not everybody has come to that same conclusion. And I noticed in a lot of people's reviews that they just didn't seem to understand or accept the style of content that VTubers make and the popularity that they have. And in an anime this clever that gets a lot of the specifics right, those specifics might actually be turnoffs to certain viewers who see the excessive vulgarity between them and like the sexual nature of the way that they talk about each other, and they might go, oh, like they're baiting these lesbian relationships, you know, this is just like anime trope. It's not actually anime trope, it's VTuber trope. And speaking of which, every outro for VTuber Legend is like this sort of strange thing. It sort of loads in and you see a VTuber model, like a 3D model show up on the screen and sort of like do this like swaying back and forth thing, which is a detail that I think is so cool because it's so specific to like, that is what they do. They start these songs, they sort of sway back and forth with their model, and then they start singing, which would turn a lot of people off. And look, I'll be the first to admit, I don't like that stuff. I skipped pretty much every outro, but technically, for my friend who thinks that the only metric of a good anime is whether or not they have different outros for every episode, like Chainsaw Man did, technically, VTuber Legend is one of the greatest animes of all time because there is a different outro for every single episode. And yes, it's that weird VTuber sing-along thing, but that doesn't matter because we sweat the details around here, and my friend has to admit that VTuber Legend is as good as Chainsaw Man. Get fucked, guy! But while I, and I'm sure many other people, appreciate these specifics, this attention to detail that they seem to get right when it comes to VTuber Legend, it also means that a lot of people aren't going to enjoy this by default. It's sort of gatekept by whether or not you're aware of the inside jokes or the types of mannerisms that they do within this community. If you're not aware of that, you might be confused by a lot of what's going on, and you'd probably enjoy it less. And they really do not hold back on filtering people out of watching the show. In episode 1, the very opening episode, it's so strange because it's literally just somebody's stream, and then it ends, quote unquote. Read the fucking title, by the way. I'm not spoiling anything, okay? It's in the title. But they show you a bunch of VTuber streams, and they go straight into the specifics of why people enjoy those streams. They go right into, like, the dick jokes. They're talking about gooning to the VTuber avatars. There's a whole ASMR section where the sound goes from the left speaker to the right speaker, and I'm sure that confused a lot of people, especially if they weren't familiar with ASMR. But it's almost like the show writers took a whole episode to just say, hey, we're fucking weird. We're not like normal people. We're a little strange. And so if you don't enjoy this section, this first episode, you're not going to enjoy the rest of this anime, buddy. Come back in a few years when you got some hair on your chest. Which is a shame because I think they're doing themselves a disservice. I think the rest of this anime past episode 1 is nowhere near as strange and unapproachable as the first episode is. There are sections that are really VTuber specific that even I didn't necessarily enjoy as much, but I do think the show has a lot to offer. The majority of the anime's runtime is like a series of stream highlight clips from the best streams of the year, more or less, and the writers do a really good job at making you feel like that's what it actually is, rather than having it feel super scripted or like it's basically a bit that they wrote for the anime, because that is what it is. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, they make you feel like you are just watching clips from a stream, and I think that's a really good touch. But it's the moments that they spend outside of the stream and some of the little details therein that made me want to make this a standalone video, and I am finally going to explain why I titled it the way that I did. See, if you know anything about VTubers, if you've ran in any circles where people are especially hateful towards them, you have probably heard the same thing over and over again. They don't look like that. This, little girl.
Okay, not little girl. Smaller female.
On the internet talking about how much she likes boobies is secretly a 47-year-old man with a voice changer. And so the showrunners at that point really have two options. The first is, much like Kamikakushi in the penultimate arc of season 1, they can show the VTuber and then they can show the person behind the VTuber. They can show that they look completely different, that they're a different type of person, and in the case of Kamikakushi, it's a person who actually has a debilitating illness. She's stuck in a wheelchair. The other option is that they can make their characters look like their VTuber avatars all the time, which might cause a more visceral reaction for people, because those people might be saying, hey, these people don't actually look like this. That's the point of VTubers. They don't look like their avatars, so you portraying them as looking like their avatars is, a bit over the top, a bit too much of a lie. It doesn't feel right. It makes you go, ugh. But much like my ex-girlfriends, I like how VTuber Legend lied to me. Because they said, hey, we're going to make these VTubers look like their avatars in real life, but to match that, we are going to make everybody around them look the same way that they do on their social media presence, which is nothing. These people don't look like anything. They're blank slates. They're faceless. They're nameless people. And so they don't actually have an image. They're just these gray, flat bodies that are walking around, which means that they're actually being consistent, because while they're not showing what the VTuber looks like in real life, they're not showing what anybody looks like in real life. And I think that's pretty fucking smart and a really clever way to maintain the lie without being hypocritical. And yes, it probably made that show a lot easier and a lot cheaper to animate. There were probably a lot of benefits that came with making that decision, but that doesn't lessen the value of making that decision to begin with. It doesn't make it any less clever. And I really liked the fact that they did that. I was holding a lot of water for them from the moment that I saw that. I was just like, honestly, props. People will say that they don't want to be lied to, but I don't think that's true. Credit to Randy Feltface and his Gumtree story, where he outright at the end admits that the entire thing is a lie. As a lot of things that comedians say are lies. A lot of the stories that they tell are completely exaggerated to the point that they might as well be made up. But it doesn't matter, because if you're lied to well enough, and if the lie is nice enough, nobody cares. Oshinoko basically said the same thing, and everyone else calls that show a fucking masterpiece. So you know what? At the end of the day, if the lie is good enough, it does deserve a certain amount of respect. I do think this was a very clever way to display their characters without losing their charm, and I give this show a lot of props for how they thought to do that. And on top of that, there's a Rias Gremory cameo from High School DxD, and they talk about gooning half the time. I'm sorry, I thought we were anime fans. I thought we were united on certain core principles, and it seems like I may have been mistaken. Oh, and I guess maybe I should talk about the main character's imminent liver failure. Hey, this show made me drink more in a good way. Work makes me drink more in a bad way. In that sense, I am much like the main character of this show. And if you don't like that, go somewhere else. There are tons of children's anime that come out every single season that have absolutely no alcohol involved whatsoever. I'm sure that's more up your alley. But promoting excessive alcohol consumption is bad. Listen to me. I was knocking back strong zeros on the streets of Shinjuku before you were done sucking on your mom's tits, and it was bliss. You simply do not understand. Come back when you are a little bit older and you have had a full-time job. And until then, shut the fuck up. So yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm not sure if I identify more with the alcoholic or the baby lady. You'll see when you get there, but I thought it was a pretty good show, and I think if you get the chance, if you've got the time, you should definitely give it a shot. I gave it an 8 out of 10. At the time, I was struggling with whether or not to give it a 9, but I figured as time passed, it would settle solidly into an 8, and that's what I think it is. That's it for this episode. Next time is incest. Like, a lot of incest. Like a weird amount. It's like a super lot.